Jason Cole had never believed in fairy tales, but when he and Mel found the house nestled in the rolling hills of Northern California, it felt like one. After 2 decades in military security, most of them deployed overseas in deserts and jungles, Jason had been ready to hang up the uniform and step into civilian life with purpose, clarity, and peace. The house was a dream, a 2-story ranch-style property with wide bay windows, open air, and a backyard that melted into golden fields. For the first time in years, he didn't wake up to the sound of distant mortars or scan rooftops for snipers. Instead, mornings were quiet, broken only by the occasional chirp of a blue jay or the gentle bubbling of the backyard pool's filtration system. Mel, his wife of 14 years, had been the cornerstone of his sanity during deployments. While Jason dealt with operations, intelligence, and threat neutralization, she kept their relationship alive across time zones and battlefields. They had talked about this life for years, the one with weekend barbecues, evening swims, and no war zone in sight. But no one warned him that peace could feel unfamiliar. His instincts never fully shut off. He still scanned every room, memorized license plates of slow-driving cars, and watched shadows like they had minds of their own. It wasn't paranoia. It was muscle memory. The drone came on a Thursday.at first. It was a faint buzzing, easy to write off as a distant lawnmower or a neighbor's power tool. But it didn't fade. It hovered, persistent, like a digital mosquito. Jason stepped outside, his eyes instinctively scanning the sky. There it was, small, sleek, with a blinking red light and rotating gimbal. It hovered right above the pool, as if drinking in every inch of their private oasis. Mel was on the lounge chair in a one-piece, sipping iced tea and reading. She hadn't noticed it. Jason didn't say a word. He simply watched, hands clenched. The drone zipped away after a few minutes, disappearing over the roofline of the house next door, the Taylor's place, if he recalled correctly. But something didn't sit right. This wasn't a random flyby. The drone had hovered, pivoted, studied, and it returned the next day. And the day after that, Jason's military instincts kicked in like an old muscle remembering a long-forgotten movement. He began documenting. At first, it was timestamps and photos on his phone. Then he moved to high-resolution video, using a GoPro rig with a tripod on the deck. After a week, he integrated audio surveillance. Then a secondary thermal camera he still had from a security consulting gig. He logged flight times, approach vectors, battery duration, retreat angles. The pattern was clear. The drone wasn't exploring, it was targeting. Mel noticed by the 3rd week. "Is it the same one?" she asked one morning, sipping her coffee, visibly uneasy. "Same model. Same time of day. Someone's watching." They filed a report. The local police were sympathetic but helpless. Without clear footage of the operator or provable harm, their hands were tied. Drones were legal. Airspace was complicated. But Jason wasn't built to accept helplessness. He pulled an RF jammer from a locked case in the garage, one of his few mementos from the field. Illegal to use in most civilian contexts, but effective. One morning, with the drone hovering a few feet above their pool and Mel sitting stiffly in her lounge chair, Jason activated the jammer from a hidden position behind the patio door. The drone shuddered in the air, spiraled awkwardly, and crashed into a nearby oak tree with a mechanical groan. Jason retrieved it calmly. It was a DJI Mavic model, top of the line, with custom mods, enhanced optics, boosted range, encrypted signal. This wasn't a hobbyist's toy. It was surveillance grade. Inside the drone, the SD card revealed everything, days of footage cataloging their backyard, slow pans of Mel in her swimsuit, zoom-ins that made Jason's stomach churn. He felt a wave of nausea, then fury. Every clip was timestamped and clearly dated. He knew where it came from now. The angle of retreat, the directional path, even the signal source, all pointed to Alan Taylor. Alan was a slick, late 40s type with 2 white teeth and a handshake that lasted 1 beat too long. He and his wife, Veronica, had moved into the neighborhood just months before Jason and Mel. They had the most updated lawn, the flashiest SUV, and the loudest evening parties. Alan always smiled too wide at Mel, spoke too casually, complimented too much. Jason had seen men like him before, entitled, slippery, always skirting the edge of acceptable. Jason walked up to Alan's front door with the broken drone in one hand and the microSD card in his pocket. When Alan opened the door, wearing a golf polo and sipping something from a tumbler, his eyes flicked to the drone immediately. "Lose something?" Jason asked, holding it up like evidence. "I don't know what that is," Alan said smoothly. "Looks expensive." Jason stared. "You're going to want to think about your next sentence very carefully." That was when Alan smiled, slow, smug, knowing. "You really think your little wife didn't notice the attention? Hell, I bet she liked it." Jason didn't remember lunging, only the sound, glass shattering, something metal falling, Alan hitting the ground with a gasp as Jason's fist met his jaw. It wasn't military clean. It was personal. It was rage. The arrest came 2 hours later. Alan had filed a report. Assault. Claiming unprovoked violence. Jason was released on bond by evening, but the damage was done, charges pending, a possible court case, and the sour taste of being on the wrong side of the law for the first time in his life. But Jason hadn't spent years analyzing threats to forget the power of evidence. The drone footage, the flight patterns, the thermal records, the voice recordings of the confrontation, all meticulously cataloged. He hired a defense attorney and laid it all out like a classified dossier. Every image of Mel, every timestamp, every vector matching Alan's house. Every word Alan had said, caught on Jason's backup mic. The courtroom was sterile, but the emotion simmered. Alan's lawyer tried to spin it, accusing Jason of aggression, suggesting jealousy, even paranoia. But the digital evidence tore the story apart. The drone's internal GPS logs were irrefutable. The footage painted a portrait of obsession, entitlement, and predatory surveillance. Alan's smile faded. His wife left the courtroom before the 3rd day of proceedings ended. The verdict came swift and strong. Jason was acquitted of all charges. Alan was found liable for illegal surveillance, emotional distress, and invasion of privacy. The court awarded Jason and Mel damages, and issued a restraining order banning Allen from coming within 500 feet of them or flying any drone within a mile of their property. But that wasn't the end. Courtroom footage leaked. News coverage followed. Allen lost his job, his professional license, and eventually his wife. Neighbors stopped waving. Lawn signs came down. He became a ghost in the neighborhood he once ruled with a smirk and a swagger. Jason mounted the broken drone on a steel plaque near their backyard gate. Under it, a hand-carved sign read, "No Fly Zone." The pool was quiet again. Mel swam in the mornings without looking up. Jason sat nearby, book in hand, one eye still trained on the sky, not out of fear, but habit. Peace wasn't a gift. It was something you protected. The season shifted, and with them, the tempo of life. Fall crept in softly, burning amber into the oaks, cooling the evenings just enough to draw sweaters from the back of closets. Jason felt the crisp air like a recalibration. He woke early, trained in the garage gym, and walked the perimeter of the property as the sun rose. Some habits, like century routines, never really left him. And now, they gave him peace. Mel had changed too. The whole ordeal had shaken her, violated her sense of safety in ways she hadn't verbalized, but Jason could see it in her silence. She flinched when the mail drone flew overhead. She closed the blinds more often. She smiled less. Sometimes Jason caught her standing still in the living room, eyes unfocused, as if listening for the subtle hum of another unwanted visitor. The betrayal of peace had left a mark. They began therapy, together and separately. Mel found language for the things she had suppressed. The feeling of being observed, the disgust that lingered after realizing someone had collected hours of her private moments without consent. Jason faced the buried anger, not just at Allen, but at a world that allowed people like him to operate under the illusion of harmlessness. Their therapist, Dr. Nadine Lang, was a cool-headed woman with the quiet strength of someone who had seen people unravel and come back from the edge. She told Jason something that stuck with him. Survivors don't just rebuild. They reinforce. Stronger foundations. Deeper roots. Reinforce they did. Jason upgraded their home security system to military-grade specs, silent alerts, perimeter motion detection, infrared cameras. He installed a private server with redundant backups. He filed a patent for a drone detection device and, at Mel's suggestion, began consulting for other families facing similar tech-based invasions. The irony wasn't lost on him. How his battlefield experience had led him to a suburban war against a new breed of invisible threats. The town had changed too. Allen's fall was public and absolute. Whispers turned into gossip, gossip into headlines, headlines into legend. He became a cautionary tale. A named parent spoke with disdain. "Don't be an Allen," some kid said when teasing turned mean. No one mowed his lawn. Flyers piled up on his porch. His house darkened by the month. The last time Jason saw him, he was loading boxes into a U-Haul alone, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. There was no satisfaction in watching him fade, only closure. But peace, once shattered, becomes a different thing when it's restored. You don't trust it the same way. You study it. You test it. You build it with intention. Jason and Mel began hosting neighbors again, small dinners, movie nights by the fire pit. They didn't speak of Allen, but his absence was felt like a room finally free of smoke. People brought wine, shared stories, stayed longer. Trust returned like a tide, slow but steady. Mel started painting again. Her studio faced the yard, sunlight streaming through tall windows. Her colors were brighter now, turquoise, copper, deep blues. Jason watched her from the deck some days, the dog curled at his feet, a coffee in hand. She was healing. They both were point one day, a letter arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a short note typed and signed, "You think you won?" But eyes are everywhere. Jason read it twice. Then he burned it. He didn't tell Mel. Instead, he contacted an old friend, Khalid, a cyber analyst he'd worked with overseas. Together, they traced the origin of the letter to a print station 2 towns over. Surveillance footage confirmed it was dropped by a man in a baseball cap and hoodie. Not Allen. Someone else. Possibly just a prank. Possibly not. Jason didn't take chances. He updated his security protocols again. He began logging unusual digital traffic, scanning for signal intrusions, setting traps in the Wi-Fi mesh for unexpected devices. Mel asked why the sudden urgency. He simply said, "Maintenance." The thing about threats is they're never entirely gone. They evolve, shift form, wear new faces. But so do those who survive them. Jason began writing at night, journals, then essays. Eventually, he compiled his experience into a manuscript. He called it Silent Battles, Securing Home in a World That Watches. It was part memoir, part tactical guide. A publisher picked it up. The advance was modest. The response wasn't. He was invited to speak at panels, on privacy, on tech safety, on veterans transitioning into civilian life. His inbox flooded with stories. Women stalked by exes using drones, families harassed by anonymous surveillance, parents desperate for ways to protect their children from eyes they couldn't see. Jason replied to everyone. His mission had changed, but it hadn't ended. One of those messages came from a mother in Arizona. Her teenage daughter had been secretly filmed by a neighbor, using a drone fitted with infrared lenses. Authorities claimed they couldn't help. The footage wasn't explicit enough. Jason flew out within a week pro bono. He installed countermeasures, built a case file, and connected them with a civil rights attorney. The drone crashed a few days later. Justice followed. Mel traveled with him on some of those trips. Other times, she stayed behind and worked on her paintings, some of which were now selling in local galleries. They weren't just pieces of art. They were messages. Boundaries. Witness. Reclamation. Every now and then, Jason walked the yard and looked up, not in fear, but in readiness. The mounted drone still sat above the gate, rusting in parts, wires exposed, a warning to anyone who thought technology granted them the right to trespass. The community changed around them. More families installed protections. The local council passed a drone privacy ordinance, unprecedented in the region. Jason was consulted on its drafting. His work, once shadowed and classified, now lived in public policy. And for the first time, his skills weren't just a reaction to war. They were shaping peace. Peace, he realized, wasn't the absence of threats, it was the presence of preparedness. It was Mel smiling freely in the sunlight. It was children playing in yards without fear of unseen eyes. It was knowing the world could always change again, and being ready for it. One evening, as Mel brushed paint across a new canvas, Jason stood behind her, arms folded. "What's this one?" he asked. She glanced over her shoulder. "It's called airspace." Jason smiled. "No-fly zone?" Mel grinned. "More like, not without permission." They laughed, and for a moment, everything felt light. But the drone above the gate, the tech in the walls, the lessons burned into muscle and memory, those remained. Because peace wasn't something you stumbled into. It was something you built, and kept. It had been nearly 2 years since the day the drone hit the tree. Since the confrontation. Since courtrooms and threats, headlines and hate mail, settlements and silence. Since Mel stood in front of a crowd of strangers and reclaimed her voice. Since Jason, for the first time in his life, had been applauded for simply being the man he always had to be in secret. Life had slowed, but not in the way some people meant it. Not a decay. Not stagnation. Not atrophy. It was clarity. Stillness by design. Their morning started early now. Jason usually rose before the sun, made coffee strong enough to wake the dead, then walked the perimeter with Scout, their black lab, who had more patience than most people. It wasn't paranoia that drove him outside every day. It was discipline. Routine. A daily reminder that their safety wasn't a fluke or a gift. It was built, reinforced, earned. Their property, once just a home, had become something closer to a base. A peaceful one, yes, with flowers and art and music and laughter, but a base nonetheless. Invisible fences, motion-triggered lighting, thermographic sensors in the upper trees. He designed the system himself with help from 2 ex-NSA contacts. It was elegant, silent, obscured, but it was there. Jason didn't believe in symbols without substance. Mel joined him most mornings now. She'd bring a second mug, wrapped in a sweater or Jason's hoodie, and they'd walk together. They didn't talk much before the sun came up. But they didn't need to. After everything they'd faced together, quiet had become a language. The drone, that drone, was still mounted above the gate. It was rusting a little now. The paint had flaked, the camera lens cracked and hanging, the body wired onto a steel baseplate that Jason had etched himself with the day they took it down. The date mattered. Not just because it marked a moment of action, but because it marked a new life. Before that moment, they had reacted. After that moment, they had chosen. One Saturday morning, Jason got a call from a journalist in New York working on a feature about domestic surveillance and suburban defense. "You're a bit of a legend in certain circles," the woman said, laughing softly. "They call you the guy who punched the sky out of your backyard." Jason didn't laugh. "I didn't punch anything. I just told it no." The story ran 2 weeks later, long form, deeply researched, laced with interviews from privacy advocates, former military operatives, and technologists. It included a 3-page section on Jason and Mel, titled The No-Fly Couple. The piece was respectful, serious, and widely read. It went viral, especially after a prominent TV personality called Jason a patriotic privacy warrior. The flood came next. Emails, DMs, packages. Some supportive, others asking for help, some just looking for someone to listen. A few, nasty, spiteful, menacing, suggested Jason had overreacted, that his military past had made him unstable. One message read, "Cameras are everywhere. You can't punch them all." Jason never replied. He didn't need to. That kind of cowardice always burned itself out, but Mel saw the toll. She watched the way his shoulders stiffened every time a new letter arrived. How his jaw locked during interviews. How his eyes darted toward any distant mechanical buzz, even if it turned out to be a kid's toy or a delivery drone 2 blocks over. Peace came back slowly. But its fragility never quite left. That's when she made the decision. Mel began organizing Canvas Shield workshops, not just as art therapy, but as public forums. The first few were local. Survivors of digital harassment, neighborhood mothers, teachers, college students, even a few quiet older men who had never told anyone about the cameras they found behind walls or under cars. The art wasn't always pretty, but it was honest. Real. There were broken lenses glued onto canvases, abstract splatters made of ink from shredded privacy letters, silhouettes of drones crossed out in red. One woman painted herself without a face. Another made a sculpture out of broken phones, coated in clay. A teen girl from Nevada created a mural titled "You Are Not Allowed Here." It went viral on TikTok. Jason watched from the sidelines most of the time. These were Mel's spaces. Her voice. Her reckoning. And yet, as he listened to the stories, daughters watched, women followed home, couples filmed through windows, he felt the tightness in his chest rise again. How many Allens were still out there? One evening after a workshop, Mel sat beside him on the back deck, legs tucked under her. "They all think they're safe, Jace. That it's not happening to them. Until it is." He nodded. "That's what I hate most. The silence before the noise." Mel looked over. "Then let's make more noise." The decision to go national wasn't made over a press release or at a conference table. It happened on the porch, over wine, with Scout snoring at their feet and the sky turning from blue to copper to indigo. Jason had been quiet most of the night, phone in hand, reading a message from a father in Minnesota. His teenage daughter had been filmed while changing in her upstairs bedroom. Drone, second-story angle, operated from an alley behind the neighborhood park. Local law enforcement called it a gray area. No arrests. No court. No closure. The man wrote, "You don't know me, Mr. Cole, but I need to believe someone out there is still fighting for families like mine. I need to believe there's still someone with the training, the will, the spine." Jason hadn't responded yet. He couldn't. Mel didn't ask what the message said. She'd seen too many like it. Instead, she said, "Let's do it. For real. Not just art. Not just the people who come to us." He looked at her. "You mean a foundation?" she said. "Public advocacy. Funding legal teams. Mobile response units. Real-world training. Grants for schools. Drone detection for at-risk areas. A full-scale movement. Jason took a long breath. It was an idea he had toyed with, scrawled into notebooks, built into half-finished slide decks. But he'd always told himself he didn't want to live in battle again. He didn't want to go back to the war, but this war had come home. And it had never left. That night, they named it together, Air Guard Initiative. Within 6 months, the foundation was registered. Jason brought in 2 former intelligence analysts and 1 civil rights attorney who had taken down corporate surveillance schemes. Mel tapped into her network of artists, teachers, and trauma counselors. The board was balanced, technical minds, creative leaders, legal visionaries, all aligned behind one core mission, to restore and protect the boundaries of personal space in the digital era. Their first national campaign was simple but potent. We see you watching. Billboards, social ads, public service announcements. Real victims sharing real stories. Drone footage recovered from arrests and lawsuits. A haunting audio clip of one teen girl describing how she stopped swimming in her own pool because he always showed up when I was in a bikini. The clip went viral, drawing both admiration and fury. The backlash came quickly. Libertarian bloggers, tech influencers, pro-drone lobbyists. They called Jason and Mel fearmongers, paranoid, militarized Luddites. One podcast guest, an ex-venture capitalist who'd invested in aerial delivery services, accused Jason of using PTSD as a brand. Jason didn't respond. Mel did. She posted a single photo, Jason asleep on the couch with scalp curled against his feet, a file folder open on his chest filled with redacted reports, victim names, and sensor data. Her caption read, "This man doesn't want your attention. He wants your children to be able to live without being watched." It received over 1.2 million likes in under 24 hours. The next phase came fast. Local Air Guard chapters. They started in Denver, then San Diego, then up through Portland and into Baltimore. Each chapter was run by trained volunteers, equipped with toolkits, legal templates, drone detection guides, emergency escalation plans, counseling contacts. Survivors didn't just get sympathy, they got strategy. Jason traveled constantly now, sometimes with Mel, sometimes alone. He trained city councils, spoke in congressional hearings, ran simulated drone intrusions for school security officers and mall developers. He taught people how to look up, how to see the sky as contested ground again. But with growth came friction. In Phoenix, a counter-protest formed outside one of his talks. Angry men holding signs, drones are freedom, stop the panic, not all eyes are bad. Jason recognized the energy. He'd seen it overseas, in war zones where foreign policy met ancient pride. People hated being told they couldn't look where they wanted. They equated boundaries with oppression. One of them, a clean-cut man in his 30s, approached Jason in the parking lot after the event. "You think you're protecting people," he said, voice low and calm. "But you're just replacing one tyranny with another." Jason studied him. "If you think being told not to watch women in their backyards is tyranny, then you were always part of the problem." The man didn't flinch. "We're everywhere, Mr. Cole. And not all of us need drones." Jason didn't report it. But that night, back at the hotel, he found a small blinking device planted behind his car's rear wheel. A GPS tracker. Commercial grade. He disabled it, flushed it, and didn't sleep. The threat had changed again. Not just digital now. Not just airborne. The eyes had feet. He flew home the next morning. Mel met him at the gate. "It's spreading, isn't it?" He nodded. Jason had spent much of his adult life preparing for threat escalation. Whether it was a shift in enemy strategy or a rising tension in a supposedly neutral zone, there was always a tremor in the system. He felt that tremor now. The Air Guard servers were hit 3 weeks after the tracker incident. It began with a slow drag in the back-end interface, subtle lag that Jason first chalked up to an overloaded cloud. Then it got worse, files disappearing, reappearing corrupted, IP logs from unknown locations in Jakarta, Bucharest, and Kansas City. When Jason's lead engineer ran a forensic scan, she found a worm designed to overwrite backup logs and reroute traffic. Mel was the one who said it out loud first. "They're not just watching anymore. They're hunting." Jason didn't disagree. What rattled him wasn't the breach itself. He had seen worse in his military days. It was the targets. Whoever did it didn't go after Air Guard's financials or their infrastructure. They went after survivor records, names, addresses, incident files, interview footage. Personal. Vulnerable. Real. The team moved fast. Systems were firewalled, servers locked down, victims contacted, digital protections issued. But the damage couldn't be undone. 6 survivor identities were leaked on a fringe message board within days. 4 of them received explicit threats. 1 moved out of state. Another was doxxed and fired after a smear campaign claimed she had fabricated her drone harassment to gain internet fame. Jason stared at her resignation letter for an hour. Her name was Lacey Hall, 23. College graduate. Former swim instructor. Filmed over 24 times without her knowledge from behind her apartment complex. "I made it worse," Jason said that night, sitting on the porch while the sprinklers kicked on. Mel didn't hesitate. "No, they made it worse. You built something they had to attack. That's proof it's working." But Jason couldn't shake the guilt. He'd spent so much time building offense, strategy, tactics, political pressure, that he had forgotten the human cost of being on the front line. And now, others were bleeding because they believed in him. Mel saw the spiral starting. So she grounded him in the only way she knew how, by asking for his help. Canvas Shield was planning a national installation, an outdoor traveling gallery that would go city to city, displaying survivor art in drone-exposed locations. Parks, rooftops, balconies, even open-air stadiums. It was bold, risky, vulnerable. "Make it safe," she told him. "Let them be seen, but on their terms." Jason threw himself into the logistics. Surveillance mesh nets, signal jammers hidden in sculptures, rapid response drone interceptors with ethical capture protocols. For every city on the tour, he assigned a local counter-surveillance partner. It wasn't just about defense. It was about showing the world that protection could be beautiful. The launch happened in Atlanta. A 3-story open canvas hung from the side of a parking garage, painted by 16-year-old Josie Mendez. It was a girl's eye, oversized, weeping circuits and barbed wire. The caption said, "I know you're up there." It made the front page of the Washington Post. That same night, Jason received a private video file on his encrypted work line. And O subject. No sender ID. He hesitated, then played it. The screen lit up with drone footage, his backyard, the pool, the deck, the mounted broken drone over the gate. Then the view shifted, zooming slowly into a window. Mel, painting. Alone. Back turned. Jason's hand gripped the edge of the desk until his knuckles went white. There was no voiceover. No message, just a timestamp, 1:42 a.m. The night before. The signal was clear. They found them again. He activated every protocol he had. Physical security. Counter-drone sensors. Legal escalation. He brought in Khalid, the former cyber intelligence contact who had helped him during the Alan Taylor case, and they began an immediate trace. The drone was custom-built, untraceable commercial parts with a scrambled RF signature. Jason estimated $6,000 to $8,000 of black market hardware. Not amateur, professional. Mel was shaken, but didn't break. "We can move again," she offered quietly. "If you want." Jason didn't answer for a long time. Then, "No. They want us scared. Moving is fear. Staying is defiance." So they stayed. But now, every inch of their home was digitized, monitored, protected with AI-enhanced defense. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a fortress of defiance. A place that said, "You can try, but we're not blinking." Media attention swelled again. The AirGuard initiative launched Home Watch, a pilot program where vetted defense experts helped families fortify their homes without resorting to isolation or paranoia. The mission, secure without surrendering joy. Jason was asked to speak at MIT, this time not as a victim but as a visionary. His talk, Digital Fences, the Ethics of Airspace, drew standing ovations and led to a panel with drone industry leaders. He faced them calmly, even when one CEO asked him, "Don't you think your movement stifles innovation?" Jason's answer was short. "If innovation depends on violating consent, then it's not innovation. It's abuse." Applause thundered through the auditorium, but the threats didn't stop. The group behind the leak was eventually identified, an anonymous collective calling itself the Viewers. Their message boards boasted about watching without permission, believing the sky was sovereign, that airspace belonged to everyone. They targeted women, children, dissidents, and now, Jason, his name trended. Death threats came hourly. FBI involvement followed. One day, Mel found their mailbox smashed. Inside it, a tiny toy drone, wings cracked, with the words "You can't watch forever" scratched into its plastic belly. Jason stared at it in silence. Then he went inside and began building something new. He called it Sentinel. It wasn't a weapon. It was a digital perimeter system that layered AI-driven pattern detection with real-time drone vector tracking and local law enforcement integration. It could predict when a drone was approaching, identify make and model, and create a digital trail that no obfuscation could erase. He open-sourced the code. People everywhere began installing it. Within weeks, drones began disappearing from suburban skies. Hobbyists complained. But victims finally slept. And through it all, Jason and Mel endured, not untouched, not unaffected, but unwavering. Their story had become more than theirs. It had become a signal. A warning. A promise. Jason didn't sleep that night. He called Khalid. He called the FBI. He called every AirGuard cybersecurity expert on his private list. Then he locked himself in his home office, unplugged everything that wasn't essential, and began dissecting the corrupted Sentinel clone line by line. What he discovered was horrifying. This wasn't just an unauthorized use of his code. The Viewers had taken Sentinel's predictive AI and weaponized it, turning surveillance defense into automated stalking infrastructure. Instead of intercepting drones, it logged behavioral patterns, timestamped vulnerabilities, and generated alerts when someone's routine made them most susceptible to being watched. And it was already lived. Jason's jaw clenched. His hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment, paralyzed not by fear, but by fury. His life's work, twisted. His defense system turned into a tool for the same monsters he had vowed to stop. Khalid's analysis confirmed it. A splinter group within the Viewers, likely former engineers and drone tech developers, had stolen the open source code the night it was uploaded, layered it with custom AI routines, and then circulated it through a black market software hub cloaked behind crypto paywalls and invite-only access. By the time the feds mobilized, at least 7,000 users had downloaded the weaponized version of Sentinel. They called it Eyes Up.